Hey there, RecLess fans. This is Shane. I'm coming to you live from Mankato, Minnesota, where I just got to do a presentation. Y'all know how much I love that. We're excited to announce our first ever RecLess meetup. If you're a fan of RecLess or you're a guest and you'd like to come out and talk to some of the hosts or see the guests or pick up your cool shirts, your RecLess shirts, come find us at Stats Brew Pub, 300 Marietta Street, Suite 100, Atlanta, Georgia, Tuesday, October 8th at 6 p.m. Now, if you didn't get a chance to order a shirt, that means you're not following us on our socials. What are you doing, guys? Come follow us on our socials. Watch all of our shenanigans. Find out about cool shit like our meetup and our shirts. So start following us on social media. All right, guys, back to the show.
Welcome to Season 3 of RecLess, the podcast making you smarter and more knowledgeable about the field of parks and recreation. Your hosts are Shane Mize, Jay Tryon, and Tom Venniro, three career-long friends from around the country who are joined by a surprise guest each episode. We're glad you're here. We hope you enjoy the ride. This is RecLess.
Well, welcome to the 46th episode of RecLess. We are officially in Season 3, and RecLess is a podcast where we're focusing on the industry of parks and recreation through three close friends in different parts of the country. My name is Jay Tryon. I am your host today, and as always, I have Shane Mize and Tom Venniro with me. How's it going, guys?
It's good. It's good. Your intros, obviously, we've talked about how well done they are. And you're even still on the kick of naming me the full episode number, right? Like I tried that Season 2. For this season, it's Season 3, Episode 2, Episode 3, whatever it is. But kudos to you.
I get excited when I keep seeing this number grow, and like, hey, we didn't know if we were going to hit number 20. Now we're on 46.
Big damn deal.
So I'm going to continue the conversation from last week.
Okay.
And last week, for those that maybe didn't listen to it, we had a great conversation about the YPN and the Young Professional Network, if you don't know what the YPN is. So all three of us have been involved in some capacity for a very long time with the YPN. We're very passionate about the YPN. So I actually have a two-part question today that feeds off of some of the stuff from last week. So my question is, if there is a young professional listening to this podcast today, what is the one reason you would recommend they get involved, or in some cases, maybe start a local YPN chapter for their state or their region? And then the second part is, when you were a young professional, was there something or an area of park and rec that you learned about that you were very intrigued about? And that wasn't actually planned. If you look at my notes, that question came up in my prep discussion with our guest today that I got thinking about. So that's a new one. Didn't plan on doing that.
Our industry we were intrigued about?
Yeah, can you
so
elaborate
like
on part 2?
Is there something that you learned when you were a YP that like, oh, I didn't know that was a thing, or I didn't know about that, and that was interesting? Don't all jump to go first.
Well, I'll start with the first part. And I think I touched on this a little bit last time, but if I was, any young professional and why you would get involved, or to your point, start one at your own state association. Jordy Emanuel is a mentee of mine through the Academy Mentorship Program. Really great young professional. And he just started, or he was part of a group that started a young professional network in Connecticut. I'm going to piggyback back a little bit off what I said last week and then add to it, but it gives young professionals a place or a seat at the table. It gives them a place to relate with others who are like-minded or in a similar point in their career, where otherwise, and again, we said this last time, if I didn't have that young professional network, or you didn't have that young professional network, that's all fine. You've got people that work in your office. You might end up kind of hanging around with those people and meeting others through them. You might know someone from being a part of a general society or board for your state. However, it's it's not the same, right? And there's definitely an advantage to having people who are in the exact same point in their careers or similar points in their careers to be able to just go to be around. At that national conference, it's intimidating at the national conference. Wouldn't you guys agree as you're younger here's a great example is that first time that you ever went to an academy event through the externship. Now, and that's one we were kind of thrown into it. You had to be there, and
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but we had to be there in this room of the biggest fish.
Yeah, you feel
in
like
the
a
sea.
minnow.
Yes, you feel like a minnow. And what do you, and I was very young at that point. The conversations, what are we talking about? Over time, we've added the buddies to that system, but that was a tough room to navigate. Yeah, they were all awesome, all very kind, and really wanted to genuinely know about me. However, there was also a nice feeling to say, okay, after that meeting, Shane, you and I met out for dinner that night. And I was in a more of a safe space with people who were, it turned into not a safe space, but that wasn't by our design. That was an uncontrolled. Yeah. We won't get into that. So yeah, that's and then I would build off of that just to kind of wrap this into a bow. I would build off of that and say early on in my career, when I was doing young professional network work through NRPA, I had also got my first opportunity after Jay, you mentioned last time, after presenting or leading a meeting, I got an opportunity the next couple of years to present a session at NRPA for the first time. And that session was, I think, called Young Professionals and Students Having a Voice and Using It. So something like along those lines. And it empowered me. Being involved in the Young Professional Network empowered me not only to present, but also to realize that I could join other committees and I could be of value. Just because I was 25, 26, 27 years old, that doesn't mean that you can't be a part of this network or other networks or committees or state association and not provide a lot of value. So we talked about that last time, but getting involved, saying yes to those groups. And that's what the Young Professional Network, I think, did for me. It really gave me a sense of confidence, experience, and a place to be that I wouldn't have picked up elsewise. As far as learning a little bit more about the field through my experience with the YPN. Yeah, it was interesting because that group of people, at least at our time, Shane, and you can add to this, probably you have a much greater memory than I do, but I'm going to throw a few names out there, but Dr. Michael Bradley, right? Brooke Burke. These are individuals who were in the education realm of Parks and Rec, right? So I was not a Park and Rec major, by the way. I don't know if we've ever said that on this podcast. You two probably know that, but I was a communication major. So, I had no idea that the major existed, and to learn that was a big subset of this field. Also, to just kind of get, again, paired with some people through the Young Professional Network that had so many varying roles over the years. Obviously, you've seen how that's taken shape. Kathy Capps is another example, right? So Kathy Capps obviously had some Park and Rec experience before, but if I recall correctly, she was writing grants. She was doing a lot.
She was safety and some of that stuff.
Yes. A lot of what I wasn't, or what I thought the typical young professional in the field, which was a programmer, someone who oversaw whatever that might be, youth sports before and after school, summer camp, anything family related, right? So yeah, I learned a lot about what others did in the field. And that was a really great experience, is to see that there were, we may be doing different jobs, but we can definitely relate. And that's out there, right? There's going to be individuals that we're going to work through or work with, whether it's on a committee or a conference. And it ultimately, helped me reach out to those like-minded individuals in my own area, right? So, I think that would be something that I wasn't maybe intending to learn.
Yeah.
Or know.
As far as getting involved, I'm an introvert, and I really do have some social anxiety, just the process. And y'all know, I don't like to, the idea before going up to present, or the idea of going into a room and having to engage folks sometimes can be overstimulating to me. But connection has always intrigued me. I've always been drawn to it, that locker room mentality where you were just with, for me, for example, you're just with the guys in the locker room, hanging out, talking, or having a close group of friends, not a huge group of friends, but a close group of friends that you felt like no matter what was going on, they would have your back, and you could lean into them when you needed help. And so I didn't feel that in the industry. Obviously, I didn't come from one of these high producing park and rec curriculums. I came from Hardin Simmons, so it was a school that didn't have a huge base in our industry. I think that's what I would say as far as my involvement and why we started the YPN was I just wanted to create some sort of connection, some sorts of community that you could interact with as you saw fit, as both an extrovert or an introvert. And we've got both, right? And we've got that YPN chat and that we refer to our YPN family, and I've added Hannah to it. So first of all, I don't have to read everything and tell her, and she can get her extrovert fill up. She can go engage. She can see it and tell me, and I never even have to look at this stupid chat anymore. But
is that the reason why you added her?
Yeah. I rarely look at that chat anymore. She tells me everything. She gets what she needs out of it and tells me what I need to know, which is how most of our marriage works. But I think creating a spot, a safe space, whether we're doing it in our agencies as parks or programs or events, where you think of the difference between a swim team, which is very collaborative and maybe teamwork oriented, community minded, versus even like a Dungeons and Dragons group that maybe an introvert kid could go and get a couple of connections as they're matriculating their mythical characters across whatever board game you're playing. That's kind of what we do. We create these spaces. And so I think in some ways I was drawn to that in our industry, and I was drawn to that with the opportunity to do the YPN. And I would tell anyone, if you have any type of drawing or yearning for those types of opportunities, YPN's a great spot for you. It's a great spot to lead. It's a great spot to learn what failure looks like. It's a great spot to dust yourself off and pick yourself back up and retry an idea. It's an incubator for what your career could be. It's an incubator for what your leadership style could be. You get a lot of opportunities to throw things up against the wall when the stakes aren't as high in the YPN, I think, in some ways, before you're doing it on an NRPA board directors level or in an academy level or some of these, areas that you could really incubate your leadership profile. So I think if you're drawn to community and you want to participate and serve in the way you want to participate and serve, the YPN is a great way to do that. I think the area of intrigue about the industry, I don't know if there's intrigue or surprise, but I don't know if I knew I'd be this neck deep in fucking government bullshit sometimes. Like when I was like, oh, I'm working at a rec center, and I wouldn't say I didn't know I was working for the city of Fort Worth for my first full-time job, but I don't know day 1, day 2, day 200 if I could have told you the bullshit you deal with sometimes being a city employee and the budget when I was that far downstream, right? When I'm just opening and closing a rec center, seeing those neighborhood kids, loving on them, helping them with homework, feeding the impoverished with our food bank. I mean, I was a government employee, obviously, but I didn't think of myself as a government employee. I definitely now think of myself as a government employee, and I understand the bureaucratic process. And Jay, we talked offline about some of the HR things I've been dealing with this week. And so I think it's definitely something that I'm still like, oh man, because I say all the time to my council, we're the thumb. Parks and Rec is the thumb of government. We're not one of the fingers. You've got safety and police and fire and streets and roads, and almost every government has those things, right? We're what enriches that quality of life component. We're what makes the grip happens. We're what rounds out the idea of the hand overall, but it's totally different than those other fingers, right? And so I feel that constantly as a director, as I'm trying to get our department where I want to see us, and going through a process where every other department doesn't have that mindset, doesn't have that goal, some of the parameters, whether it's a software profile or a budgeting profile or a purchasing policy, having all of my guys who never are even on a computer take hours of computer training when they're mowing fields or stuff like that just sometimes constantly reminds me that we're different than everybody else.
It's interesting. We don't do a lot of conversations around just government in general. We had an episode with Barbie where we talked about it politically.
Yeah.
But I don't think we have really touched on that much and how that is a very big part of our industry when you get to a leadership role. But as a young professional, you're not thinking about politics. You're not thinking about just overall government
You're programming the event,
structure. Yeah.
making sure the pool's open or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
You see a town supervisor or a board member, you don't even really understand that that's what they are, right? It's just a person that your director introduced you to.
Have I told you that about the Uber story? So my park that I house out of, I have our director, my office, the director's office, AD, everything. We have a barn, a rentable facility, and we have a pool. Food got delivered. One of the lifeguards, 16, 17-year-old lifeguard, had food delivered to her, Uber Eats, and it came to our office. And I didn't want to move it in case it was maybe a family member that was having it delivered. So I walked down to the pool to see if anybody had delivered food. And a lifeguard was sitting there. I was like, are you expecting an Uber order? And she was like, yeah. I was like, okay, it got delivered over there. She was like, can you just pick it up and bring it over? And I was like, I'm not your Uber driver. Then the director of the department, she thought I was the guy delivering her the food, And so sometimes that's totally true, Tom. They don't know who we are. They don't get it, like it's fine.
Yeah. Well, I would just add my two things before we dive into the guests, since they're patiently waiting. I would say the one thing, and Shane, you hit it on the head with the relationships. And I liked your analogy with the sports teams and athletes and just kind of the teamwork consistency, because I would say in my personal life, I have two very close groups of friends. And one of them is the groups of guys that I played Little League baseball with, that we all went to the same elementary school, middle school, high school. And, we've been close as can be since we were 5, 6, 7 years old. And then I have my YPN fam. It's literally the two groups of people that I can rely on, no matter what. If times are hard, or if I need something, like I can go to one of these groups for whatever I need. So the relationships that can be built through common goals and consistency with your job and your efforts through Park and Rec is amazing, because everyone's going through similar challenges, or you have similar goals to reach and you're trying to do the same thing. So, find that group of folks and rely on that. And, I've said this before and we've all said it, but we encourage folks, like, if you don't have that, like, reach out to some of us and we'll help you find it, because we know a lot of people in different states and we can get you connected. But then the other thing that intrigued me, I remember going to conference, I think one of my first conferences, and going to the YPN retreat and just meeting YPs for the first time. And, when you're a young professional and you're fresh out of college, it's very typical for a Park and Rec major to have to do an internship. I had to do an internship. I had to do 2 internships. And I remember talking to folks about like where they did their internships. And it opened up my eyes to a lot of different opportunities of like different career paths of, you have military recreation, you have resorts and tourism and sports areas and nonprofits and, obviously government and municipalities. And there's all these different areas that like, I never knew all of the openings that were available. And I always find that very interesting. And at any given point, like you could switch if, and we had JD that one time on, and, he might've had a big recreation background and then he wanted to focus on athletics and tournaments. And so there's always opportunities to go a different path if you decide to. And that is leading me to the intro for today's guest. Today's guest has a very diverse background within Park and Recreation. All 3 of us know this guest personally and have known them for quite some time. Although their first job out of college was a teacher at an elementary school, they have worked at 2 different agencies in Maryland and Massachusetts. Okay. Our guest currently, as of today, has 3 kids, but has one due in September. So will be a father of 4. So yes, I just gave away that it is a male. A large portion of their job and personal life involves interacting with Park and Rec programs, but I like to be someone that brings on first-time guests, okay? So today's guest is the first time we've had a guest in this area of recreation. I said that when we had Kathy Capps on too, because it was our first time having someone from state parks. But this person has a job within recreation, but not in a government capacity.
And they've worked in Maryland and Massachusetts.
Yep.
Well, I'm stumped so far. That drives me insane, by the way.
Okay, so they were very involved with NRPA from 2011 to 2015, including writing some blogs and doing video logs for the YPN when we used to do video logs. I even went back and watched some of it, and it was when we used to use that company called Uvo, if you remember them. So this is back in the old days of YPN. They were very involved in YPN early on.
And they did our vlogs?
Oh, yeah.
Nate did vlogs.
I love that you have no clue.
I feel like we should know.
I feel like this is pissing me off.
Okay. So today's guest is the Associate Director for the University of New Hampshire Campus
Oh,
Recreation, Kayode Lewis.
Get out of here.
What?
How you doing, gentlemen?
Hey, what's
Hey,
up?
Howdy. How's it
How's it
going?
going? How's
What's
everyone
up,
doing?
man? What a blast
Oh.
from the past. How are
Yeah.
you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. Best smile
Good.
and NRPA.
Yeah. I just enjoy your content, folks. It's good to see you. It's been too long.
It has been
Man.
too long.
Well, it is great to see you. And as I said, the four of us, we've known each other for many years, but in different capacities. When we originally met you, you were working in Greenbelt, Maryland, but you've since transitioned from a municipality to campus rec. Can you just talk about what that transition's like and what your day-to-day role is working for campus recreation?
Absolutely. First off, again, thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate you folks. So Kayode Lewis, I currently serve as Associate Director for the University of New Hampshire Campus Rec Department. I started in the city of Greenbelt, Maryland as a rec coordinator. So I started way back in rec as like a camp counselor. And then as I was an undergrad at University of Maryland, worked at this rec center, Greenbelt Youth Center. After I graduated, I started teaching third grade in Prince George's County Public Schools. And then towards the end of my first year teaching, my old supervisor informed me that there was a full-time job at the city of Greenbelt. So I applied and I got in. And then since then, I've just been involved in recreation. So I was in Greenbelt for approximately like 5.5 years, serving as like a rec coordinator role. And after that, I went to this town of Medfield, Massachusetts, Park and Rec Department as a program coordinator, then served as interim director for a little bit. And then after that, went back to the program coordinator role before becoming instructional and youth program coordinator in campus rec. And I've been here at UNH going on, it's gonna be my 10th year starting in 2025. So time's gone by so fast. But in the time I was with Greenbelt and Medfield, I was heavily involved in NRPA. And that's where I met you folks. And I feel like, listening to the content, I feel like I'm still in like those conference hallways, just having the conversation. No, it's just crazy. It's like being in the campus rec has been, I thoroughly enjoy it. But part of what facilitated that change was I want to pursue some additional education. And the role that I saw in this department was one that was primarily serving the community. So I started at Campus Recreation as an instructional and youth program coordinator. So I was responsible for like their summer day camp, which was a long-standing day camp that was going on for at least like 30 years. And so the director who hired me at the time, Stacy Hall, who's now like assistant vice provost for like 5 different departments here at the university. But at the time, she was just campus rec director. Her vision was to like expand the summer program to academic year youth programs and then build out programs for adults if they wanted to learn a sport or skill from a non-credit track, and then ideally, hopefully, serve on a committee where people could earn credit for like certain sports or skills. So been involved in that, and then eventually kind of moved my way up in the department. Like 2019, became assistant director of aquatics, fitness, youth and instructional programs. So I started working with the indoor pools and outdoor pools here. So at UNH, we have like third largest outdoor pool in the state and an indoor pool that operates. And then in 2021, I became associate director my portfolio changed to include outdoor adventure. So that's comprised of like students who work with the bouldering wall, trip leaders, and our gear rental, and then risk management for the entire department. So working with like coordinator risk management to ensure like patrons have a safe and engaging experience while interacting with our facilities and programs. So I serve in that role now. I would report to Director Dave Charette, and this there I am now. So in that time here, I was also able to go back to school and get my an MPA. So it was really, time has gone by fast and slow at the same time.
A
Yeah.
lot's going on.
It's
A lot
great
is
to see
going
you,
on.
man.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
so
You always,
cool.
See you, folks.
always lit up a room, and always one of the best dressed, by the way. And I learned a lot from you and my style, just so you know. I want to. You had mentioned some information there. It's been a really awesome ride for you since being in our world, I guess. But when I think, and maybe our listeners think about campus rec, at least here, I think about, okay, intramural sports, whatever. Maybe it's athletics with the school. Our high school level, they also have what's called community education. So I wouldn't say it's a competitor of ours, but they're offering classes for adults primarily. Not a whole lot of youth. That's where I think our bread and butter is, but they're doing, maybe it's piano lessons, shout out to Hannah. Maybe it is, safe driver courses, whatever it might be. What it sounds like, and I would never assume this, but from your perspective, it sounds like you're serving the greater community, not just individuals who are affiliated with the college. Is that accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. And my role essentially kind of evolved from working with the youth and now the facility management piece, because in addition to those pools, we have people from the surrounding communities. UNH, we oversee like a 200-acre, it's basically a state park. It's called Bendham's Pond. It's a glacier lake right in Barrington. It's about 15 minutes from campus, and it's owned and operated by the university. The vast majority of the programs within my portfolio are like just community members. So it's been really, but what working with the students, because there's this heavy student development piece that goes in terms of like the training of the students they're cycling in and cycling out and prepping them for their next professional step while operating these outward facing facilities and programs and services.
So your students are employing, or they're running these programs?
Correct.
In some cases. Okay. So just a question for all three of you then, for the panel here. And I think this is, again, be helpful for our listeners. And I love learning about different aspects or realms of parks and recreation. Is that common in your areas? Shane and Jay in Texas and Kayode, is that common in your area, or are you unique to that with the University of New Hampshire?
So for Texas, I would say it's pretty unique. Texas State,
Okay.
Allie Thomas, and that team out there has some land that the state of Texas allows Texas State University to manage some outdoor areas that I think you can ride four-wheelers on and trails, and they do some land management stuff out there. After coaching, I was in intramurals. I was a GA in campus rec, and I thought for a little bit that may be the pathway I'd go. We were more of a retention tool in some ways. Like here's Western Illinois University. You're bringing your kid to it. Here's all the cool things that keeps your kid happy while they're gone and keeps them here for 4 years. And one of those main things is a huge rec center and a great space that you can come in, from like 5 a.m. to midnight and work out and have a safe space to be, to work out, do all those things. I don't believe those facilities that I worked in college and in grad school allowed resident or non-students to come use. But like I know, like I said, Texas State does. I believe A&M or some of the other places in Texas might have, if folks live near the rec center, they can pay some rate and come in. But I think it's pretty rare. That's pretty cool what they're doing.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I don't think when I went to school, the school allowed outside of students to use facilities.
Teachers, professors, but not.
Yes.
Yes. And Brockport has the CERC where I can be a community member and use their fitness center, but that's about the extent.
Yeah.
So Jay, we obviously have similar experiences with Brockport.
But that facility didn't exist when I went.
Correct.
So that was built after. So we didn't really have a state-of-the-art fitness slash, athletic complex. But back to the original question, I don't know of any North Carolina-based schools that have properties or parks that they manage that are available for public use, which is really neat and unique for sure. That's awesome.
I think the only thing I'd say is Western had a thing called the Hornfield campus. It was like a high ropes course, and our RPTA students worked that course, and the community did go out and do fundraisers and like networking. You could have team collaboration meetings out there, and our students led you through these high ropes courses, things like that. But it wasn't like this day use. I think what New Hampshire's doing is pretty cool.
Wait. I just wanted to let Kayode kind of weigh in on that. Is that common to you? I assume that there's, just like we have NRPA, I assume that there's obviously some kind of a campus rec association, and that
NERSA.
Okay, and that you all share a little bit about what you do. And it sounds like from what you're doing, you can get a lot still out of NRPA, which is awesome. But
I was telling Jay, I'm thinking about going to conference again next year. But before, when I was in Vegas, I was talking to you, Shane, and you were like, "Are you going to go to NERSA?" I was like, "What is NERSA?" Because I just started at UNH. So I've been to a couple of nurses, but I would say like a lot of like the strategies I picked up while in the time of going to NRPA conference has been hugely beneficial to me.
That's great.
In my position in campus rec. And I've also had like that experience supplemented because Stacy Hall, Dr. Stacy Hall, she's really big in NERSA. So she won like the NERSA Lifetime Achievement Award. It's been a really good like synergy of like experience I had here, experience I had there. I went to NASPA, which is like for student personnel this past year. It was in like Seattle. But to answer the question, to add some context, New Hampshire is like one of like the least publicly funded state schools in the nation, either the first or second in terms of like state funding. So when you look at like campus rec, primarily it's used as you were saying, a tool to like for recruitment and retention of students, enhance the student experience, provide these engaging avenues to get folks either working or increase their wellness. But then also these outward facing programs and services really do help drive a lot of revenue for the department and the university. So like that's why I went to Maryland for undergrad and my first master's. And that was not a thing either at that rec center. We would never really see like non-Maryland folks in that rec center. In comparison to here, like the community and like Durham, New Hampshire is where we're located. We are probably the primary
rec provider for them.
Rec provider for these folks who want like fitness classes. Our pool, like we're getting folks from summer camp groups from all over to come over there, and then like even like going to Fort Mendham's Pond too. So that is like the whole business model too. So I feel like I feel like I'm still Parks and Rec without it not being Parks and Rec, but like can't be with the student development piece. So
sounds it.
So we talked about NERSA a little bit, the National Intramural Rec Sports Association, and they are heavily intramural folks go there all the time, and club sports folks and fitness stuff. And I went for a couple years and was looking for jobs at one time, internships and other things, and it's a totally different vibe than an RPA. In some ways good, in some ways bad, I think. And when we first started the YPN, I tried to pull some of the cool stuff from NERSA over. What's a NERSA conference, NERSA experience, NERSA sessions, NERSA networking like for you?
I would say it was way bigger in terms of gross attendance, because you have all these schools from all over. It's divided into different regions.
Yep.
So we're region one, which is the Northeast, two like the South, Midwest, and they even have Canada. And so what I found was they're always looking for more sessions, but it was given my role, trying to find some sessions that really align to like the outward facing pieces of it's been a challenge, because it's like we're so revenue heavy here and so community heavy. It was really helpful for like the student development pieces and like the risk management pieces. And I would say for some of these overall, and this is before I got risk management added to like my portfolio, a lot of the discussions has been like, how do these universities like navigate this new requirement of like risk management when it comes to travel? Because you have with club sports, imagine like imagine like an athletic department, but within campus recreation where student leaders are responsible for everything, like their fundraising, figuring out who they're going to be playing, their uniform.
People don't understand that. Outside of that varsity football or varsity polo or varsity wrestling or whatever, a university could have a student football club, a tackle student football club, and they could travel. Oklahoma's tackle football club team could go play UTs. The only difference is it's 19 and 20-year-old kids scheduling it, booking travel, booking, the venue, booking the
it's fun fact. I played on a club baseball team, and you're exactly right. I remember I was young. I remember the guys in charge. I mean, we took trips too. I mean, they took it seriously. We were going to Maryland for tournaments in the spring. We went to Florida for a tournament. And these individuals, the elders, the seniors on the team, they're booking. I couldn't even drive a rental van. They have to book rental vans and take a whole entire team, book hotels.
The whole infrastructure has one Kayode at each university trying to wrangle all of these teams' leaders. You got the women's soccer team, and that club sports person manages a really unique group of individuals, because you've got all these folks that are passionate about what they're doing. They're trying to play and continue their, enjoyment of that sport, and they're traveling all over. And that club sports person is a one-man show for sure.
So within my department, we call it competitive sports, because that's one of my colleagues. He oversees the club sports, and he has two other like colleagues, one for intramurals and another one for the club sports. What's really presented an interesting challenge is, I didn't want to lose what Tom was saying. You think about all the experiences you probably picked up, the leadership experiences within traveling and like leading your team, how that probably transfers to today in your role. But then we try to illustrate that to students, but then also this risk management piece of how do you stay in compliance with university guidelines for travel to make sure that people who are driving vans are certified, and there's a way to register them with the university in compliance with like USNH policies. And then also medical coverage for these events, because like for a lot of these events that do occur, that's where the risk management comes in, where we're trying to get like certified athletic trainers on site for people who may have injuries. And another area is where if and when concussions occur, what does that look like from a process of like getting people cleared to play later on? So that's another thing we're looking at now that is presented. And that's been an ongoing discussion here, because everyone who does work here is certified for like the concussion piece. So I think of like Kathy Capps as an example. Like I did the externship. She was in that like cohort with me. I couldn't wrap my mind at the time. Like she was risk management, like it was like, all right, cool. Like, but it's such a broad, and it's an ongoing discussion of like it permeates into every facet or program or facility. So it's like it's an ongoing conversation that never ends.
That's interesting.
Yeah, well, and you're doing all that risk management, and there could be a lightning storm in North Carolina where your team's playing, and you are, whoever that club sports person is, ultimately responsible for making sure those policies and procedures, even and your women's soccer teams in Canada playing, and your water polo groups, in New York State playing, and you're managing all that. That's a job for sure.
It's interesting to think about it this way. And you were mentioning like injuries, so I went to Brockport, which is, Tom lives right outside of Brockport, used to live in Brockport, and I ran track. It's a D3 school. I ran track for 2 years there, but we had a club rugby team that was super successful, and they used to travel farther than like our actual like official sports teams. But they all like managed it themselves. Like it wasn't, like we would have a track meet and we'd go an hour away. We go to Utica or we go to Hamilton, but like they were traveling outside of the state, and they'd be like overnight for 2-3 nights, but it was all club. So like there's a lot more that goes on that people would never even realize.
And they do. I completely agree. And that's a part of the biggest when we're trying to recruit students, a lot of these tour groups, they always end at Campus Rec because our facility it's newer. When I came here, they just started expanding, like they doubled the size of the facility and they were building an outdoor pool. But all these tour groups, they always end at this fireside lounge, and they talk about like the pool. If you want to start a sport club, like this is where you can do. And like it's definitely a huge draw for our students and a great leadership opportunity for them.
Kayode, when we were talking earlier about intrigued, and I said, I didn't realize what being a government employee would be in some ways. I would think at your level, as you matriculate up from they brought an NRPA guy in to run programs for the community in a college campus. Cool. So I'm a rec person. I can do rec on one university versus at a rec center that's city owned, right? No big deal. But as you start to matriculate up and you're now the associate director, much like being a government employee and starting to be like, well, I didn't realize I was going to be dealing with budgets and Freedom of Information Act bullshit. I imagine you have the same thing with student housing, or like you're dealing with what a university profile is as you go up. In fact, I don't know how well you know Donna Hahn, the assistant director of housing for New Hampshire, but I was at her wedding when she was a Hardin Simmons GA and married one of my best friends, and they actually got married in Boston. They now live up in New Hampshire, but she works at your university on your campus. Yeah. So how has that changed your profile as you've started to grow up and you're dealing with student union building employees and you're dealing with resident life and residential housing issues, and you're like, man, I didn't have to deal with this when I was a Park and Rec employee.
Yeah. So I think it's a different cup of tea, because I'll give an example of like when I was working in Medfield, because we reported it was a very small department, town's 12,000 people, and we had a park and recreation board that was not advisory, but they were policy making. So they were in charge of hiring, firing, and wow. Like it was very segmented because every commissioner wanted what they wanted. It ended up being inherently political. In this environment, it feels the model is different because we report and we work for the students. They are our number one priority. And then based on that core understanding of that mission, working with the other factors that come into play, like you talked about, like Freedom of Information Act requests. Like we have in New Hampshire, it's like the right to know law. So any publicly funded entity is subject to, you could go to the university and submit a request for what was your rationale for doing this action, even something like opening a pool. Someone could ask exactly why you chose a specific vendor, and you have to provide that rationale. In navigating that, I feel like it's a clearer path because it doesn't seem as inherently political, because even in my role now, it's this core focus on risk management, make sure everyone's safe, trying to keep the community engaged while like making sure the students are like learning and being nimble to like these changes in the environment. Because we know, like from a funding standpoint, we're going to have financial challenges. So how can we make sure we have a first-rate product that is engaging? I would also say, like, obviously the personnel because I have currently I have 4 staff who report to me and like I work directly with. It does take time to furnish those relationships and develop those relationships, but I feel like the environment it's just a clearer overall vision that's not as politically driven, because the reporting structure it goes clear through the students. So on the opposite end, we have to be able to be more data driven to illustrate the impact of our services, because we're not going to be shielded to some of these changes in the environment. Let me give you an example. The Northeast is the only area in the United States that has the decreasing number of traditionally college-age students because people had less children. Oh, wow. So for all the universities in this area, Harvard, BU, UMass Lowell. We are fighting for more students to keep our enrollments up. And so you've seen this trend of smaller liberal arts institutions shuttering their doors because they're not able to keep that enrollment level. And so I remember the meeting, like it was like this, it was like 4 years ago. Stacy, like she showed us this graph, and you should see this declining, like now these are birth rates, and this is like these people are becoming like they're entering college. What are we going to do to make this as engaging of an experience for everyone? And frankly, like we saw some of those changes last year at the university where like they ended up cutting like 70 jobs, 70 positions at the university with like the budget reset because they are basically planning for this declining enrollment. Now, it was challenging university-wide. I would say of all the departments, Campus Rec was probably hit the least because we are still showing that impact of our services for the broader community. So having these folks being able to access our facilities and services has been nothing but has been an asset for us in spite of those challenges.
That's fascinating because you're right, people are having less kids. Not you and I, Kayode. Tom and Jay are having less kids. They only have, 2 to our 4. But I've got 3 college age kids and only one is pursuing college right now. They're just looking at other stuff. So that's something I hadn't thought about. That's fascinating for a residential life university type setting to have to figure out what the next 20 years looks like.
And you think also like the cost of like the increasing cost of college, like some people think it's like, is it even worth it from an impact standpoint where like there's so many other avenues now.
We've had the conversation about just the major, but as a whole, globally as a whole for universities. To add on to your point of the Northeast, and I don't know if people consider New York the Northeast, but I do. And we experience a lot of the same weather patterns.
Show the face.
Okay. So not the far Northeast, but we have a lot of the same weather patterns, right? And so here's another part that I at least have seen here. Shane, you're a great example of this, right? People are moving to the Austin area. People are moving away from the north. They're moving away from New York. It's very interesting to me, right? That there are other places in this country they're going. So that does not necessarily help. That obviously adds to this challenge of less kids. Is that what's a desirable place for people to live?
Florida, Texas, where are they Arizona, seeing all these snowbirds just say, let's just do it year round. Yeah. And then their families start to move down because
correct. Yeah.
Well, grandma's already there. Why, let's just move there early or whatever. Yeah. Mike Clark did that, right?
So, I mean, that's another challenge in itself. I want to ask a question about the other side of this in the political sense. And first of all, just make a point, Jay, I really appreciate you bringing Kayode on because this conversation's been incredibly intriguing already. And I love learning about this other side of the business or the profession. It's interesting. You can make a parallel to this. Of course, we're making parallels all day. So your students are like our taxpayers, right? So your students, the families, the parents, they are they're your taxpayers, and we have those. Now, I want to kind of go into the direction of going upwards. And we have had some interesting workings with our local university in Brockport, where they had cut the Rec and Leisure Studies program, and we had written letters. And I'm an adjunct there too, so it put me in a little bit of an awkward position as a practitioner who utilizes them for interns and volunteers, but also an adjunct for the department. There was no discussion. They decided, the provost made a decision based on enrollment. And I understand people have to make tough decisions. So for us, it's a board. It's elected officials. For you, it's whatever, could tell us a little bit about that part of I guess, again, I know politics isn't the right word, but how does it work upwards with those that you are reporting to on a campus? Does that seem political at all, or not so much? And is it a clear, as you mentioned before, there's a pretty clear direction on the other end?
Yeah. So I'll offer some context in terms of like where we're positioned from a departmental standpoint. So Campus Rec lies within student life, and student life is divided to approximately like 19 different departments. But the branch of student life that we're seated with, we are coupled with the Memorial Union Building, student activities, residential life, and housing. And so that branch reports to like Stacey Hall, who is assistant vice provost for student engagement. That's what we call it, student engagement. And then she reports to the senior vice provost for student life, who now reports to the president. So there was recently just a shift where like we were reporting to the provost. Now his name's Kenneth Holmes. He reports directly to the president. So in terms of just like the way the budgeting process works, every student who attends University of New Hampshire does pay like a rec fee. And so student government, every year, they meet with the director and we basically say, oh, we're asking for an X amount increase, and then illustrating the impact of the programs, and then SGA approves that increase or not. So that's the funding from like the students. And then another part of the budget is comprised from like external revenue projections from a lot of like the program services I'm working with, like the youth programs, revenue from our pools, rentals, Mendham's Pond, things like that. So that the conversation about use of how the student dollars are used is always ongoing, because we're trying to illustrate that impact of like, what are you getting for this recreation fee that you are paying? And so that process starts every new fiscal year. And then there's always this idea of it's melt, like for the students who did enroll, there's inevitably going to be a few who do drop and lose the funding for that fee. And then like, how is that navigated through that space of making sure you hit budget? So that was the politics of that kind of happens. And then like also capital projects that might be occurring as well. So I could speak from like the aquatic side, trying to put those in because like our indoor pool is going to be due for a major renovation. So working with those other areas within the university, whether it be facilities, asset management, project management, to talk about like, all right, we have for as new as our outdoor pool is, we have an indoor pool that's like 1962 that last time was renovated was 2007. It's due for some major renovations, but some great opportunities too, because with this being the state flagship, other patrons from all around the state come here and they see like what can be done from a rec facility management or program management standpoint. So,
the one thing about campus rec that I'm always trying to get on the Parks and Rec side is I always think of Parks and Rec as a retention and recruitment tool for a city. Yeah. I don't know if people move to a city for the roads, even if they're amazing, and the stoplights and, the fiscal responsibility of the auditing team. But if you got a really good Parks and Rec system, really good trails and really good parks and a really good rec center, I think that factors in. Schools factor in, commutes factor in. I get it, but we play a part of that role. But at the campus rec level, it's definitely a recruitment and retention tool. Like kids will look at University of New Hampshire, and then I'm sure they go to Vermont or Boston or some of these other areas that are close to them when they're making that decision. Like, man, that pool was awesome. I could see myself working out there every day. And like, it is a tool in a lot of ways. When you're working on campus, what's that? The times that I was on a university campus, it just always felt alive. It was always creative and fun, and the experience of thought and ideas and that youthful ignorance, maybe that they were all going to take on the world and they were all going to accomplish their goals. There was something really magical about being on a campus. Do you house out of the student rec center? Do you get to experience the really cool essence of being around the youth every day?
So my initial role, yes, because we were basically building that like sub-department or that program area. So program area being the youth instructional programs from scratch. So there's a lot of excitement about like trying to get the student staff to work and provide that service. More so, it's less now because now I have the pro staff who work with the students. I work directly with them. They report to me, and it's more so like trying to harness these ideas and be able to like use them to drive the future vision of the department. So it's a heck of a juggling act, because you want students to be engaged when they bring you an idea. And then it's also the reality of like, how does this align to like the risk management requirements of like the university system or department? Can this idea be facilitated safely without like tampering down that momentum? And so I find that very intriguing about the role I have now, because ultimately I do view, we're reporting to them too. So like we want them to be able to have that type of experience. And then also just being very realistic in terms of like what challenges they have to think through if they want their idea to come to life. And so I think that's where these opportunities come into play to really grow these opportunities for the students. I'll take, for example, we have a bouldering wall in our rec center. And so we've had bouldering wall competitions every semester. And then I have another student, his name's Ethan O'Leary, rec leader. He's winning all these awards for like rec leadership and within the department. And so this idea of how do you implement a spray wall on our bouldering wall and be able to have engagement with people who are coming to the wall who are complete beginners. So we started like instructional videos of like, where do I start? Scan a QR code. This is the wall. It's divided into sections. The difficulty of the routes are used with this system. And then also you'll see the section with all these additional holds where you can go on an app and see other routes that others have climbed and rate them yourself. So it's kind of a crowdsourced engaging way of getting people back on the wall. And you see this organic community forming. And from my role, I see how can you make sure that idea is able to grow, make sure there's soil for said idea. So, and that's one thing I really do like about this role and being in a place like this. One other thing, I want to go back to what Tom was saying too, like our partnerships with our academic departments are huge, because like in terms of enhancing the experience, we're offering these part-time positions that supplement what they might be learning. We have recreation management and policy as an academic department here that it's a major. So we have a lot of like student employees who do come work in campus recs, directly supplementing their experience of what they're learning in classes here, whether they want to go in like event management or Parks and Rec municipal or here within campus rec. We have had a lot of success in the past cycling students into like the GA role. So like after you finish an entry-level position, whether it be in aquatics, the lifeguard, you could become a program assistant. You could apply for grad assistantships elsewhere. Like you said, you got a GA, right, Shane?
Yep.
Yeah, and get your grad school paid for while picking up a master's and gaining more additional work experience.
And the one cool thing about working in a nurse environment and that academic calendar system, the one thing that I always thought was cool about NERSA that you can never replicate at NRPA is they have these forced hiring windows, right? A school semester ends. And so when you're at NERSA, everyone is applying for new jobs. Not everyone, obviously, if you're happy where you're at, but people are applying for jobs and people are being interviewed at jobs and people are being offered jobs and grad assistant jobs are posted and you're interviewing with folks. And so that was a cool thing. I tried to recreate that at the Career Center and it never really came through. But man, it is just this vibrant spot where there's tension and fear and happiness, like all intersecting and mishmashing also. Because like, think of that first day nervous job energy feeling that you have. Hundreds of other students have it, hundreds of other professionals have it. Everyone's walking around in either t-shirts because they're just attending the conference or suit and ties because they're trying to get that new job. It's a very unique intersection there for sure.
Well, and to kind of feed off of that, if there are people listening to this that work in another area park and rec but are interested in campus rec, like what advice would you give them if they wanted to pursue that? Or what recommendations would you give to get their feet wet in that area?
So I'll give two different avenues. And I'll offer the context of every semester we have like a facility management class that comes towards our aquatics facilities. At the end of every year, I inevitably ask folks, I'm like, how many of you are members of like the state New Hampshire Park and Recreation Association or NRPA? And no one raises their hands. And I was just like, you can make this a career. I'll talk about the park and rec side first. And I talk about these scholarships that I was able to benefit from earlier in my career. No other than Tiffany Johnson. It's at Maryland Recreation Park Association. So she presented, remember the session because this is when she was in DC. I was like, I really enjoy your session. I was like, I asked her the same question. She was just like, you don't know? There are these fellowships at NRPA. You should apply for it. And I was like, I'm going to do that. And it was just out of a movie. You apply in 2012, I got the diversity. I applied for Young Professional Fellowship in 2013, didn't get it, but I got AARPA, the externship, and then applied for like the Young Professional one in 2014 and got that. Thank you, Tiffany, if you're ever hearing this. Yeah. And then like you see like the access to like these mentors, like a 2-year, all of you, the avenue's there. I keep emphasizing that every time as an avenue because it really is beneficial. And then also, I see it being wide open through the GA route as well. If you're in campus rec here and like we're having these conversations with our students who are like, what are you doing next year? In like a very like relaxed manner, because like you don't want to elicit any anxiety. And to let them know this is an avenue that you can get that master's while working in an environment that you're already familiar and you've already started building these skills. So even here, we've tried to use that experience to provide them additional academic credit. So Stacy started up an applied leadership class. So any of our student supervisors, they take a 2-credit course. It's called Campus Rec Applied Leadership. And it gives them, and we talk about like professional development avenues past your role here being a student leader. So I would say there are 2 different avenues that are essentially wide open. I would say it talks about taking that jump because I remember that my first conference, you're going to have that inherent fear of like, am I going to meet people? Like, what am I going to learn? But being able to put that in context is huge. And I think that's been extremely beneficial to my development as a professional. I feel like it's like, I listen to the content too, and I really appreciate it, but I'm like being able to put that in context as well. What's intriguing about this podcast has been you've democratized it. Like it's more accessible now too. So that's what's really, it's been very interesting to see what happens now. I think I really enjoy it.
I love that. You just mentioned a couple of our former guests too that were
Yep. Yeah, I just got a comment that I was actually going to say a couple moments ago, but it didn't fit in with the question where we were going, but it fit in perfectly with what you had just said.
Tom's always looking for a way to get his comments in. That's all this is about.
I feel that's more you than me, but hey, whatever. You know what I mean? I'm not here to judge. We'll let our
watching your family fight at the reunion.
That's right.
Hold on, really quick, just because you guys are going down that path. When Kayode and I were having a little pre-show talking, he's like, "I love how you guys troll each other."
Yeah,
and this is happening right now.
Happens too often. It's starting to hurt my ego. Hey, so. What I really think is unique about this conversation and some of the conversations we've had, and I would love to know if there's anything, if we hear from anybody in the future that says, hey, because of your podcast, I got out of Dodge. I was sick of municipal government, and I heard what Kayode had to say.
Campus rec, consulting, or state parks,
consulting. That's very interesting to me because I feel that a lot of what you said today is going to be attractive to people.
Sure. Yeah, I would agree. Okay, we're going to switch things up here now and do a couple rounds of some rapid fire where we just ask you some quick questions. And first thing that comes to mind is, whatever you want to shout out. So I'm just curious. Obviously, you have a passion for your university, but is there another second favorite college or university outside of New Hampshire that you like to visit or have been associated with in some capacity?
It's to work with in a kind of professional way or just personally? Or
just personally. Like, I mean, obviously, like there's folks that love, the Georgia Bulldogs for whatever reason. So like they're big Georgia fans or UNC or Duke, what's outside of New Hampshire? Like what's your go-to college if you're going to either watch a sport or you just like to support the sport?
Maryland all day. Maryland. Okay. I went there. Everyone in my family went there. Like I love Maryland so much. This has become essentially like my home now. But yeah, I still follow Maryland sports very, very closely.
Maybe one of your kids can go to Maryland.
Yeah. I would love if they did. But if they came here to UNH, it'd be good too. But
what do you miss most about community rec? Again, you do a lot of that, but you're centered through the school and the students. No, he doesn't miss anything.
It's just, yeah. I would say I do miss NRPA quite a bit. I haven't had the time to get back involved. I mean, like I'm really the mentors and the relationships that I've made with some of these professionals, people who nurtured me in Greenbelt, Guy Quinn, Greg Varda, Steve Parks, and then like these Ron Strickler in Maryland.
Mm. That's a
And then
blast from the
like,
past.
yeah. And then
Mhm.
like even like being involved, I think that was probably one of like it was super, not only was it super fun, but like I felt like I grew exponentially because it's like it really encouraged me to take the jump from Maryland to Mass. Because I remember like Chris Nunes, he was my mentor in Houston, and he like he had to give me like a talk, and he was like, you gotta relax, man. Like, you gotta really enjoy this ride. It would help like kind of put the context of, all right, I have courage to take this jump. If you don't know the answer, you have a strategy to find the answer. So more so the people, the
Yeah,
professional relationships I have or had.
That's
that's
it.
cool.
You've listed at least 5 or 6 past
Yeah,
guests of ours.
it's been
Yeah.
great. It's been great. This one is for you, rapid fire, and for Jay. At one time, I used to do some handwritten notes, and Hannah would create some stationery, and we'd send them out. And I know I sent one to Kayode at one time, and I know I sent one to Jay. And the note was encouraging y'all in your growth as a young professional, and I left some stationery for y'all to send to someone else. Who did you send your stationery to, if you ever used it? And same thing for Jay.
I didn't use the stationery. I reached out to John Stutzman
Oh,
because
cool.
I just checked in on him because he was probably like the last professional I would say like I had a chance to speak to when I was like in Vegas, who's part of like YPN. I think I lost touch. I was just trying to get a sense of like what your next steps were and like
Yeah.
kind of encouraging him as well.
Reach
And
out to him. He would love to hear from you, I'm sure.
yeah,
He's a director now in Minnesota.
oh wow,
He was on
congrats.
the podcast a couple
Yeah.
seasons back.
Yep.
Ah,
It's funny you asked that question, Shane, because I vividly remember the stationery because you had it in a different sized envelope and you didn't fold it. It was just like flat paper and it had something on the bottom, a design on the bottom. And I don't think I sent it out, to be
Yeah.
honest with
No, that's fine. I I would write notes, try to encourage. I was more analog back in the day. And she wanted to do something cool. So she made stationery for each
you.
person. I'd write notes and then she left, I think, a couple. It probably just had a J or a K or something on it for y'all if y'all ever used
Yeah.
it. And I
One
never
other
wrote
thing
Tom anything.
I either didn't need the encouragement or you just didn't care enough. I was half thinking Jay was gonna say, "You wrote me a letter,"
Yeah.
but
No, I
he
remember it.
remembers.
Well, Coyote, I'm curious to know, like, when I go on vacation, I love to visit new parks and different rec centers. Like, is that similar, like in the campus rec world? Like, if you go somewhere, do you ever just like want to go visit a campus and like see what they have to offer?
from a rec facility standpoint, I've become really intrigued with the pools and aquatic facility
Okay,
because
cool.
it's especially being in the Northeast, I've seen like this idea of aging indoor facilities. We have a newer outdoor facility. So I'm always intrigued to see like, oh, especially with our students who do work, they're local in the summer and they'll go back to college. Like, oh, like tell me about Americans pool. And like they're like, why are you asking me about the pool? But I'm just very curious to see kind of like how they operate over there. And then just from a park standpoint, I love going out. Like I've enjoyed camping with my family. So I'll remove like the campuses from that. So like we went up to like Burlington 3, 4 weeks ago, and then we were in Freeport last weekend camping. So, and I'm always
We
wondering,
rec-
like, oh, how do you rent your paddle boards? How do you
well,
rent
we
your
recently
kayaks?
had the director of
Yes, we
Burlington, Cindy
did.
White, as
I
a guest a couple of months
Yeah.
ago.
Nice. I think of her every time I go to that campground because I'm just like, oh, I wonder if she's gonna like stop by. But we camp there every year for my birthday.
Oh,
Since
that's cool.
yeah, so like that's one of my
That's great.
favorite spots to go.
I enjoy that we're giving the Northeast, the real Northeast, of course, some
Not New
real,
York.
yeah, it's not New York, some
Okay.
cred on this show. And the fall is what people talk about when they talk about New York or going up to the Northeast. Like we want to go and see the leaf peepers, right? That's a term some of you may or may not have heard before, but that's a real thing. People who go up to look at the changing of the leaves. I don't know a whole lot of people that are going to New Hampshire. I'm sure it's beautiful. A lot of those areas up there are gorgeous.
This feels like a backhanded
Tons of
compliment
history.
so far.
No, that's not. So my question, this isn't the real question, but where exactly are you in New Hampshire? I know where you're at the university working, but where do you live? What's the city or town?
I actually live in Massachusetts.
Okay,
So
you're living in Mass, which is
yeah, so New Hampshire is in UNH is in Durham, New Hampshire, which is considered New Hampshire seacoast.
okay.
So it's like only 18 miles of seacoast in New Hampshire, then you hit Maine. My daughter, we maintain a residence in Newburyport, Massachusetts, which is second to last town before you hit New Hampshire. It's like
Okay.
it's right along the Merrimack when the Merrimack River hits the Atlantic Ocean. We also spent a lot of time in Gloucester. You ever heard like the movie Perfect Storm with George Clooney, like Fisherman's Village
Yeah.
on Cape Ann? We spent a lot of time there as well in some of the weekends.
So my question was, whether it's in where you live in Mass or even New Hampshire, if someone were to go up to visit. And Shane, that wasn't a backhanded comment. I feel that nobody comes to New York. They don't come unless they want to go see the Great Lakes or New York City, right? So what are we doing? What if I'm coming up there and we're going to visit? What are we doing in your area?
All right. So I would say you want to make it your way up to up 95. So assuming you're flying to Boston, say spend some time exactly like where I live, Newburyport, that area, because it's like a quaint you think of like New England coastal town. That's it. It's ideal.
Okay.
If you're going to New Hampshire, that's a beauty of where UNH is. 2 hours from the mountains and 1 hour from Boston. I would say go to the North Conway area to enjoy like Pangamangus Highway, White Mountains, great hiking right within there. We send a lot before like the budget cuts. We used to send our trip leaders out there with groups to just go on hikes in the Whites and then head back across the 95, head up to Maine and like just go seek like up to Portland, Maine, Freeport area, and then make your way north to Acadia. And then that would be like an ideal trip because like you're seeing, like I've never been to Acadia, been as far as Freeport, but that would be my next park visit that I really want to go to. And then if you had it in additional time, it's like the Bold Coast. So like all the way up to like Lubeck, which is like really, really North Maine, like close to where like Chris Nunes had his first job up there. Fort Kent area where like you could like walk into Canada area.
It's a new country. Yeah.
Yeah. That's an area I really want to explore too, because it's like I can walk into Canada. It's just like the camping opportunities would be amazing. So I've only been as far as Freeport. And I made the joke in 2015 in Vegas. I was like, I'm just going to keep going north as north as possible.
You painted a great picture.
Fellas, I think Coyote's figured out a way to hack our industry because he works in Parks and Rec. Still feels like a Park and Rec guy, but he gets summers like off almost. Like he's got the time to take a full summer vacation. This is
and the
he's
politics.
doing it on an academic calendar.
Yeah, and yes, no politics.
That's politics.
He's
He did. He
hacked
it. That's what I'm saying. People are going to listen to this and jump ship.
Incredible. So my question, my round robin question is and I know you don't have the full summers off, but you probably have less of a summer work life than you do like a lot of Park and Rec professionals. So with the idea that you've got summers that you could really go somewhere, what's your next real travel destination? Not up the Gold Coast. Like if you were going to do something, take a couple weeks and travel, take advantage of a longer summer break, where would you love to go? Anywhere.
So assuming I would have the time, I go to Montpellier, France. And it's like my wife studied there abroad. And we went there when we had our daughter when she was like maybe 6 or 8 months old. But you have this European city. It had the amenities of the parks. It has a public transportation system. And it would be an ideal European destination for children. And I feel like we would just go on the train and just like travel along the coast, whether it be east to like North Italy or go west towards Spain. So that would be like an ideal, I don't know, when the next time we'll be able to take a a trip like that. Hopefully soon, but like it would be that. And then my close second favorite would be going back to the Azore Islands, Portuguese islands in the middle of the Atlantic. Imagine like the geographic features of Hawaii with like a third of the people, and it's
Wow.
like it's China Islands, and it's like everything you think of, like three volcanic lakes, excellent hiking, and that's where we named our daughter after a town in on Pico,
Oh,
Magdalena. So yeah, that would be my close second.
Well, Coyote, this was awesome. We appreciate you spending the time with us and reminiscing and throwing back a bunch of names that we haven't heard in a while and just kind of catching up and learning what you're doing now. Because, it's been a lot of fun and learning more about just not just what you do, but what your industry and what Campus Rec has to offer. And I think we've all learned a lot. And who knows, maybe we all jump ship one day and go your way.
Well, no, if you ever find yourself in this area, I really do mean it. Just please reach out. I'll shoot my cell phone number over. And then really good to see you folks per usual. I'm going to try to make it to conference section. I'm saying it out loud.
please,
So
Keep us
I'm gonna
posted.
just
please
like
come
see
to
you folks and
Atlanta.
just like
That would be
reconnect and see how
awesome.
Well,
everyone's been.
you say next year. So next year you bring the whole family.
Yeah, yeah.
Bring it to
Where's
Disney.
it next year? Is it
Disney World.
Orlando?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good. We'll do the Disney. So
That'd be awesome.
I've heard your feelings on Disney, Shane. There's
Okay,
Yeah.
good. I'm glad it's stated. Yeah.
now we will loop you in. You'll be joining us.
100%.
Well, hey, thank you for your time, man. This was great.
No worries. Good seeing you folks. Take care.
Okay.
So
Take care.
Take care. Have a good one.
care.
you too. Bye.
Man, that was
Man.
fun.
Hey.
Good job,
That
Jay.
is incredible. He's always been the nicest, most genuine
Yeah.
person. NRPA's worse off without him. Like every year you go and you don't see him, it stinks because he was always just a nice, fun, genuine person who actually, when you talk to him, it felt like nothing else mattered. He was totally into what you were saying, finding out more about you, what was going on. Such a genuinely great dude.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's I've always gotten the feel from him. He's kind of a, I think a lot of us are, but lifelong learner and student. He just
True.
keeps on going, right? And we said it, he definitely found some kind of a hack. And I mean, there is no doubt what he is doing. When I asked that question earlier, I was very genuine. I've never heard of a campus rec that provides the services. It seems like
that was unique.
You know what? We've been building this rec center in Pflugerville. One of the things I've been trying to reframe the conversation around is how much we can learn from student rec centers. Because you get a bunch of educated, first-time job. They potentially are recently married. They're buying their first home. They're coming to work at Dell or Apple or some tech firm. They're moving to the Austin area, and we're giving them a 27,000 square foot, 24-year-old rec center. And they're like, well, that's not what I grew up on campus. For the last 4 years, I attended this Disney Carnival cruise ship building that was open to close, amazing. And then I get a rec center with one basketball court. We have to continue to create environments that look like the environments they're leaving, and the rec center that I'm trying to build in Pflugerville takes a lot of cues from the rec centers that these student populations are providing. And I think our industry could still learn a lot from NERSA and members like Kayode. And I don't know if we do enough to reach across the aisle per se and to figure out they're dealing with the next generation. They're educating them, they're training them, they're working with them, they're scheduling them, they're evaluating them. We could do more to learn from those folks.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, and it's so interesting because we've had some conversations about like the decline of park and rec people that are going the degree. But then like he's saying it's like across the board, like the school in general. It's not just park and rec. So
scary.
You never know what that future will look like in any capacity.
And that provost that he talked about had to cut 70 in positions. I'm sure that was tough, but I bet provosts across the nation are dealing with, if there's a rapid decline in people that are applying for jobs, or students that are applying to be on your campus, and you're getting less kids in, and you don't need as much dorms. And he's right. People are having less kids, and less kids are going to college. And so it's like, I'm sure as a academic person, if you look at what the next 20 years looks like, I'm sure it looks pretty daunting.
Well, and to his credit and to New Hampshire's credit, the model that they're running is a lot. It's a lot like the model that some of us now. He did mention Maryland or DC, right? So like when I think of DC, I think of fully funded parks and rec facilities because that's what I was taught when I went to a seminar, right? And that's unique to me. But our model is revenue, so it's a lot of revenue. Let's say that drives us. It's not just tax dollars. Like we can't get by on 100% tax dollars. That's just not how it works in my agency. I think that a lot of universities could learn from their model, right? And find a viability. They're almost protected in that sense. Of course.
Yeah, less students come in, but more community members may use those facilities. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Good job, Jay. What a
Awesome.
great dude.
That was fun.
That dude's awesome.
Yeah. I loved seeing your face when you saw it was him because we haven't seen him in years. Yeah. And I've known, him and I have been talking for a couple months now getting this plan. So I knew the unveiling would be fun.
Yeah.
What a genuinely great dude.
Good job.
Well, great time, guys, as usual. And listeners, hope you enjoyed, and we'll catch you all soon. Take care.
See you next time.
See ya.